All right, and we are live with another episode of Mentor Minutes. This is the chance for leaders from around the world to just do a live Q&A session with me, and we can take some of the principles and the theory in leadership and apply it to real-world situations. So if you've come to this late, if you missed out on the live session, no big deal. You can still drop down into the comments section, ask your question. I always go back to the prior day's session and take a look and make sure there aren't any questions that I missed. And if you're tuning in on the podcast or over on YouTube, you can do the same thing. I'll get those comments, get those questions, and get them on the next episode of Mentor Minutes. Eknath, great to see you here. And I did want to give a shout out before I actually got started. Tomorrow I will be doing my second book discussion. So last week we discussed Spencer Johnson's Peaks and Valleys, one of my favorite books. Helps with my career. It helped with my personal life as well. Great book. If you haven't checked it out, you can check it out here. Also tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will be talking about Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, one of my favorite leadership books that's come out in the last couple of years. So tune in for that. Russell, Jacqueline, and there's Eknath. Good to see you guys here. Glad you tuned in. I do have some questions. Lisa, good to see you here. I do have two questions I didn't get a chance to get to in yesterday's session, and I wanted to start out with those today. Then they're good ones for everybody to listen into. Becky had the question, it's, is there a benefit in letting the boss know a coworker is claiming ideas and plans as their own? Does it make me seem petty? And that's a fantastic question, Betty. In those cases, what I like to do is first, take a step back. Most of the time when this takes place, the boss or the other people are aware that it takes place. The reason is this behavior is usually pervasive with an individual. It's almost a character trait for them. So it doesn't just happen to you, it's happened to everybody else in the organization as well. So I want to say that every idea that this person has, every plan that they supposedly put together comes with almost a grain of salt, because it isn't just your ideas or the other person's ideas that they have kind of taken as their own. It is, everybody's, and so they all see that. The second thing that I want to mention is no, you don't want to handle it directly. If you handle it directly, it does kind of come across as snitching or as something that's petty. What you want to do, and there's an art form to it, is mention perhaps your contribution. Or the better case is where you know they've taken it from somebody else. It's one of those, yes, I heard Cameron talking about that actually last week, and I think the two of them discussed it. And so you bring somebody else into the discussion. That's a great way of planting, I want to say, that seed of doubt. Good to see everybody jumping on here, and Patty as well. So use somebody else. If they've taken somebody else's idea, that can be something that is really helpful for you and doesn't seem petty at all. So that would be the way that I would handle. Take the perspective that the truth comes out. Not immediately, but eventually that truth comes out, and people see more than you realize. They may not even consciously acknowledge it in many cases, but they will subconsciously know that this person is engaging in a behavior that isn't really ethical. The other thing is leverage where they do it to other people as well. So, Glenn, I see you got the question here, and I got one more that I need to get to from yesterday's session, and it is from Romans, and then I'll get right to yours, Gliz. And it is one that everybody loves, and that is the best approach to getting a pay increase. Or pay raise. So the best way to get a pay raise is not to actually handle it directly. It almost never, ever works out. I know that there are lots of discussions out there. I've had the discussions on if you have to go for a pay raise, then make sure you've been exceptional in your work in recent history, that you have documented where you have not just exceeded expectations, but where you have taken on extra responsibilities. And then you can go forth to your boss in regards to asking for a pay raise. Hey, I'm doing a great job in my current role, but I've also taken on this responsibility, this responsibility, this responsibility. It isn't that those were special projects. It is that you have taken those on a long-term basis. All right, that's where you get the pay raise, is by taking on additional responsibilities. Why I tell everybody, ask your boss for special projects. Look to take those things on, because those are the things that lead to it. Now, with that being said, the reality is almost nobody gets a pay increase and stays in their current job. The reason is as soon as that sort of precedent has been set in the organization, then all of a sudden everybody wants a pay increase and they won't warrant it, and people are people usually see the good in themselves and the bad in others, and so it creates a huge problem. That's the reasonable side to it. So it's very difficult to get a pay raise. If you want a pay raise, and what I recommend for people to get a pay raise is you want to look for the next promotion. That's your best way of getting a pay raise. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you get moved from line level to supervisor. It can be that those extra responsibilities that you have taken on create a new position. You see this a lot, and I've seen this a lot in organizations that are expanding. What happens is you get a bunch of supervisors, 5, 6, 7, 10 supervisors. And at a certain point, the organization is growing and an analyst position gets created, or some sort of scheduling coordinator gets created. Some other position that is higher than line level, maybe equal with supervisors. But those are the positions that you're looking to create. So it may be that you go to your boss and you say, you don't ask for a pay raise, you ask for a promotion, a title change, something different in that regards. And so you go to them and say, hey, I've taken on this responsibility, I've taken on this responsibility, I think I'd take on this responsibility. I think it's more apt for me to be in a role of an analyst or, again, some sort of scheduling coordinator. So make the suggestion. Maybe it's in line with a supervisor's, role, something like that. And that's where you get your pay increase. Those almost always get not almost always get approved, but those are more likely to get approved than a pay raise. Your boss likely doesn't control the decision, the final decision as to whether you get a pay raise. They have to go to somebody else and get approval for that. Likewise, they have to do that with a new position. But what I've found in my own experience, having, gone to bat for employees before in both of these instances, is that executive management is more interested in creating a structure that supports the organization and would be more apt to take on a new role as opposed to taking on an increase in pay for people who ask for it. So look for a promotion, look for a new position that is a promotion. That is their best way to get a pay raise, and it aligns really well with what's going to help grow your career. Last point on this, and then I'll start getting into the questions from today. It can be frustrating. It's one of those things where you want to move up in the organization. You see the opportunity. You may miss opportunities. And I just recently had a discussion with one of my private coaching clients as far as the expectations and what you should be looking for as far as moving up in the organization. And I was told by a boss ages ago that every 18 to 24 months you want to be looking to make another jump. Now that slows as you start moving up higher and higher in an organization, but I think it's a good rule of thumb. Every 1.5 to 2 years. So personally, I was stuck in one of my companies in a line level position, my goodness, almost 2 decades ago. And I was there for three years. And then lo and behold, I got 2 promotions over the time of 6 months. So now all of a sudden, every 1.5, 2 years, I'm supposed to get a promotion. For 3 years, I wasn't getting anywhere. However, if you looked at it over a 4-year time frame, I was right on pace for those things. Keep taking responsibilities, keep building your resume, and it will come. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Have a little bit of patience, but be firm in letting your boss know what you want. So, great discussions, great questions to start us out today. Gliz has a question that is, how do you handle team managers who have an ego? And I like that. It's actually something that's covered tomorrow in Extreme Ownership. In that book, I'll give you a little preview on it. A lot of it is taking the ego out of the situation by taking on the responsibility yourself. And what happens is by taking on the responsibility yourself, extreme ownership, what happens is you don't make the other person defensive when you have a critique of them, when you're asking for more from them, because you've taken on that ultimate responsibility and it creates a discussion point. Now that's one way to go depending on the situation that you have. I like to have people who are confident, who have an ego. I like to actually almost support that and support the positive sides of that. However, there is that balance. That support and that positivity behind that allows my in to be able to have the harder discussion. Hey, Cameron, you are great and you do this and this and this really well. There is an area where I think we could see some improvement, and that is this area. I don't like to call it the feedback sandwich or anything like that, but it's something that takes down those defensive. The biggest problem with ego is it equates with arrogance. And people who are arrogant don't learn, don't take feedback. And that's what is probably difficult in your case as well, is there is no acknowledgement of the improvement. And so you also bring in some perspective. So you bring in your own perspective. Hey, I was terrible at this. I thought I was really spectacular, but I'm not. And so you take in your own experience in those things, and that again deflates that ego, because you are falling on the sword, for lack of a better term, to get the discussion going. But I like to reinforce the positive aspects of ego, which is confidence. But I like to balance that with perspective and reality. So use the one to get to the other a little bit. The other way to tackle ego is numbers. Black and white numbers. What I've seen in my career is when you take those people, and I'll use line level personnel who have been with the company for 10, 12, 15, 20 years and think that they are just the cat's meow and they are just the best at their particular position. And then lo and behold, you put up the stats for performance, whether it's sales, whether it's calls answered, whether it's time on the phones, whether it's orders shipped, invoices processed, whatever it is, you put up the full list of every single employee, and they can see in black and white that they are not at the very top, that they might not even be in the top quartile, that they might be down in the middle or down at the bottom. That's a great way of killing ego, is giving black and white responses. So if you have a team manager, one of the best ways to do this, and they'll have a defense for it, I know, is to take their team's performance. Bring the team's performance into the discussion and say, hey, Cameron, so we've got 8 teams. Here's where your team is performing as far as this metric, this metric, this metric is concerned. Tackle all of those. Show them where they rank and say, hey, we're not in tops in this, so let's go ahead and deal with it. All right, what you've done is you've taken away a certain level of defensiveness from them, because it's hard to refute those hard numbers. Now they will claim that they have this person and this person, it's dragging down all of our numbers, that sort of thing. That's fine. I get that. Other people have difficult, employees too. Our role is to figure out how to make the improvements. And so I know that you know this job. This is where you pad the ego a little bit. I know you know this job. I know you are up for this challenge. Let's see if we can turn these numbers around and get you up into, the top 1, 2, or 3 in each of these metrics, okay? So use the positive sides of ego to address the negative sides of ego, and look to make things black and white. That's one of the best ways of getting accountability and getting buy-in from people and getting through those difficult employees, is when you present things in a way that they simply can't refute. And one last point on that refutation and defensiveness, you know where they're going to come down on. You know that they're going to highlight the 2 employees that aren't doing well. All right. So anticipate their defensiveness and what issues they're going to have, and have your responses ready. Be reasonable. Make it not about them. Make it about, the role itself. All right. Take it out of a personal and make it into the professional environment. Hope that helps, Liz. Lisa has the next question. How do you learn to be more assertive in the workplace? Great question. I love that one, Lisa. The best way to do that is to get very clear on your why. Why is it that you are looking to do something? Why are you looking to take a particular action? And the way that you get clear on your why is get crystal clear on what the goals of the organization are. We prioritize sales and the customer experience. And so if you align your decisions and what you do behind the top goals of your organization, behind the top goals of your department, and you know that the decisions that you're making are going to have this impact on those, then you can move forward confidently. I used to make a lot of decisions in my roles that weren't necessarily in my job description. They were in the gray area of usurping the chain of command, shall we say. But I always had a reason for it and why it affected the top areas, the top goals of the organization. And so if it came out that the decision was a wrong one, I had a reason for it. and I had a justified reason that made sense to anybody. Could I have made a mistake? Sure. Did I make a mistake? Sure. But those are the situations where you can move confidently, is when you're firm as far as your reason is concerned. The other place to look at this, get clear on that reason, but also look at the place where you are an expert. For lack of a better term, maybe it's just a place you have more experience than somebody else. It could be a particular area, a particular product line, a particular report, something along those lines where you have a vast amount of experience. Lean on that, and what happens is you create that wedge of assertiveness, and then you're able to kind of expand it out. Because what you're going to do is, after you make that little wedge in regards to a topic that you're experienced with, you're also going to look for those people that know you really well, that know what you're about, that know that you make those decisions based on the goals of the company. Then you go ahead and leverage on those people and look to expand out what you are assertive about. Hope that helps out. That's a really great question, Lisa. And if anybody has any clarifications on that assertiveness, drop it down into the comments and I'll get to that, and we can kind of carry on that discussion. I like it when we kind of move through similar topics all the way through. Mara, I'm so glad you like the advice, and it's good to see you here again today. What is the best way to quit a job without burning all bridges? Interesting. I don't think I've gotten that question in a long time, Mar. And I'm sorry you find yourself in that situation, and I kind of understand, based on some prior questions, why you might be there with it. First key is getting your ship in order, Mar. So the big issue with quitting and what burns the most bridges is when you leave the organization in a difficult situation. All right? They will likely not have your replacement ready to go on day one. But what you can do is you can make sure that your department is running efficiently, that you have the structure in place, whether it is one-on-one meetings, weekly meetings, you have communication things in place. You don't have a lot of follow-up. And the things that you do have to follow up on, you have those clearly marked out with timelines and the details that they need. In a lot of cases, your boss will be taking on your responsibilities. So lay it out. This is what needs to take place on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday. This is what needs to take place 3 weeks from now. We have a customer call. Offer a person within the organization that could take some of those roles and responsibilities while they wait for somebody. So leave them with a plan. Create the plan for them so that it is easy for them to manage the business without you. The second thing is allow enough time. Give 2 weeks notice minimum. If you have another job lined up, you need to be able to give 2 weeks notice. And if the other organization isn't going to accept, they want you now, they don't want to wait 2 weeks, that's not an organization that you want to be a part of. That shows respect for everybody. And if they're not showing respect to a competitor, to your prior position, they're not going to be showing you that respect. So a minimum of 2 weeks. If you are more flexible, then I recommend giving 4 weeks notice. So if you're moving into a freelance job, for instance, that's what happens a lot these days. Go ahead and give 4 weeks notice. Give 6 weeks notice. At my last job, before I started doing mentoring and coaching full time, I gave 10 weeks notice that I was moving on, because I didn't have any sort of hard deadline. And I allowed enough time for them to get somebody in, me to be able to work with them, and the organization to basically not skip a beat. So that's how you handle it without burning bridges. Those individuals who, even after you've taken all of those steps, who still hold a grudge against you for moving on in the organization, there wasn't going to be anything that you could do with those individuals. Do what is right. When all else fails, do what is right and what is respectful for your employer and for your team. Next question comes in. Oh, Christy Coleman, what book were you holding up at the beginning? Good question. And I think it comes out reversed here when I do these live sessions. It's Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And I'll be discussing it tomorrow. I've got a few more pages to get through here as I go through for the second time now. But a fantastic book. Again, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Pick up a copy. It is well worth it. One of the best leadership books I've read in the last couple of years. And you can tune into tomorrow's discussion. You're not going to miss anything with the book. You can still read the book and still get a ton out of it. I'm just going to be taking some of the things that jumped out at me and some of the applications of the book into the real world. So glad you're interested, Christy. I hope you pick it up, and I hope you tune in tomorrow. It's going to be a really good discussion. I love that book. Katrina has the question, best way to go into a new establishment as head director? Good question. It kind of depends on the situation of this. So if you're going into, it sounds like you've been hired into this position as the head director. And that's fantastic. Congratulations on moving into that. When you're moving into a new organization, even if it is the exact same industry, it is important that you spend the first 2+ weeks gathering information. I want you to have interviews with each of your employees, each of the people that reports to you. I want you to ask them my favorite 5 questions of leadership. What do you see going right in the organization? What do you see going wrong in the organization? Where are there opportunities we can take advantage of? Where are there problems we need to fix? And how can I help you do a better job? When you do that, you get a ton of information and you get a ton of action steps. So we all, when we get into a new role, we want to hit the ground running. We want to make that immediate impact. You've probably got plans on things that you want to institute. I want you to hold off on those plans, and I want you to address some of the things that come up in those interviews with your employees and direct reports. All right, go as deep as you can. It may be, if you're head director, it may be that you've got managers and you've got supervisors and you've got employees. I encourage you to interview those 5 questions with as many people in the organization as possible. You will get a ton of information. It is absolutely magnificent. And what happens is you get a lot of low-hanging fruit actions. Oh, the printer doesn't work over here. Well, why do we have a dead printer? Why don't we get it fixed? Lots of little things that you can do that have an impact. And when people see that the new head director is taking feedback and taking action on that feedback, A, you're going to get a whole lot more feedback when you ask the questions again. And B, you're going to start creating a sense of ownership within the organization. All right, so 2 weeks, gathering as much information as possible with people. I say 2 weeks to start putting some of those things in place that they have recommended, and then you get into your agenda on those things that you wanted to get in place. But that information gathering is absolutely huge. And I tell people, when you are interviewing for a position like this, it is important to weave in there what they can expect from you in the first month, in the first 2 months, in the first 3 and 6 months. And when they hear that you're going to be gathering that information and you're going to be taking action on it and you're going to be creating some of these plans, that is something that is attractive to a potential employer and something you definitely should try to weave into that interview. Congratulations, Katrina, and I hope what I said there helps a lot. Now, I have hit the end. I want to say the end here. I've run out of questions, so if you have any questions, any concerns on leadership, any frustrations, I want you to dive down into the comment section. I will get to it right away here in real time. It's your opportunity to try to get some momentum here. We do have only 1 more day left, 1.5 days here on the Pacific Coast, to take care of things this week. So if there's anything you're struggling with, anything you need to get across the finish line, any hurdle that you have, go ahead, let me know. We'll get that out there, and we'll hopefully get that done and out of the way so that you can enjoy your weekend that's out there. One of the things that I wanted to mention was in regards to accountability. And that's a subject that I'll probably be talking about tomorrow, weaving through some of these questions that I get in regards to accountability. And one of the most important things, and I'll be discussing it, is if you want more accountability from your team, you have to be willing to bring them into the process more. The best way to make somebody accountable is to give them their plan and their idea to work. When they have that sense of ownership, it's easier for them to have that motivation because they're more personally invested in it. So when we talk accountability, a lot of times we're talking about ownership over the role. And if you want people to have that, you need to bring them into the discussion. It can simply be, you know what your course of action is, you know what your plan is. Simply be pulling somebody in and saying, hey, Katrina, this is what I was thinking of doing in regards to this. And you lay out the plan. What do you think? Where do you see problems with that? Where are the biggest opportunities or biggest chance that there's going to be a hurdle? What's going to be the biggest problem? I want to get this right, but I wanted to get some feedback from people. And that's a great way. If you do that, you can do that. You bring 3 people in. If you have a group of 10, 12, have 3 meetings, split it up and bring people into the discussion. If it's important to you, if you want them to be accountable, if you want them to be invested in it, then that's going to be one of the best ways that you can drive that accountability into your team, bringing them into the discussion. Gliz has the next question for us, and it's the best way to answer interview for operations manager positions. Crystal, I'm so glad you're packing it up and out to Coeur d'Alene there. It's going to be toasty out there, I would imagine, for the next month or so. But again, congrats. It depends on the questions you're getting, Gliz, of course. But the best way to answer interview questions in general is to be able to cite an example of how you applied whatever it is that your answer is. And one of the ways that you can get clear on this is, and it's a good thing to weave into your resume and therefore be ready for it in an interview, is to list out what your accomplishments are. What made you a good employee? How many months were you at the top of the sales list? What accolades did you get? What awards did you get? Who did you get a training position? Did you take on special reports? Did you take on special projects? What made you better? When did you step up in a crisis? I want you to list out as many accomplishments, all of the good things that happened in your prior positions. You have that set up ahead of time so that you can, so that you have that ready in your resume. Put it in your resume. It's not just about responsibilities, it's about accomplishments, but then you can go ahead and have those kind of ready in your mind to weave into questions. Those are the best ways to handle those operational questions. The other thing in regards to operations or any position is talking about contingencies. So it isn't just, hey, we did this and it worked out great, but you also throw in, we did this and it worked out great, but if it failed in this area, we knew ahead of time that we were going to do this. And if it failed in this area, we knew we were going to do this ahead of time. So we had our contingencies in place. That's one of those things that gets missed a lot in interviews, and it's one of those things that get missed in general operations as well, is working on those contingencies. But when you're interviewing, definitely tackle accomplishments and contingencies. That's a great way to do it. Carla has our next question, and it's, what can we do when our general manager doesn't communicate with her employees? A difficult situation. Managing up the food chain is always tough, Carla. The first thing immediately that I would mention is to simply ask questions. Get in the practice of asking questions. If you want more communication with your employees, with your peers, everybody, ask questions because it creates a dialogue. But beyond that with the boss, what I often see as the issue with communication is people are talking about two different things. All right? You're an employee, a supervisor, manager, whatever it is, and you've got your concerns in regards to your department. But your general manager's concerns are up here in regards to something else. And it's important that you recognize what it is that they are concerned with. What do they talk about all the time? What is their boss holding them accountable for? What are they constantly talking to you about? And what are they, looking over your shoulder about? Those are the things that matter to your general manager. If you want to communicate more, communicate in a way that addresses their concerns. So it may be that you need more staffing. All right? So you go to your boss and say, hey, I need more staffing. And no, and that's just it. But your boss is hyper concerned about revenue and getting top line revenue in order. And so when you say, hey, we don't have as much staffing, and I know that we are leaving revenue on the table because we're simply not able to get to people in a timely fashion. Well, now that's something that might pique their interest. You want to let them know what's in it for me, the with them, but really address it from their concern sort of way. The other way to do this is to try to set up some structure. So it would be really valuable if we could have you, and I've done this before where I've had vice presidents or the CEO, depending on the company that I was with, say, hey, if just once a quarter I could get you to come in, that would be spectacular. And let the team ask you questions. We'll limit it to just 1 hour. You can update them on what's going on, and they can ask you some questions. So you try to set up a structure for some of that communication. And it's one of those things that perhaps you can work a patting of the ego depending on the type of general manager that you have here. I've had both where if I was stroking the ego, then that was something that he was going to do. and the other one, it was just very reasonable, and this is the benefit that you're going to get out of it, and here's how to minimize the amount of time that you have to deal with. But address things in their terms as much as possible, and that helps ease that communication. The other thing that I mentioned when a general manager isn't communicating is to get in touch with your peers. A lot of times, you're getting one piece of the pie as far as the topic is concerned, but your peer is getting another piece, and another peer is getting another piece. But if you get together, all of a sudden, you've got a pretty decent picture of what's going on based on what everybody has heard. So one of those other structural things that you can get in place is talking through some of those issues with your peers. It may be you all go out to lunch once a week. It may be that you just meet around the water cooler in somebody's office and talk through things. Or you just simply engage and say, hey, you know what, the general manager mentioned this. And I didn't get a chance to ask this or this. Has anybody else heard anything in regards to this? It's a great way to see if you can fill in the blanks and if other people are getting those discussions. When you show your general manager how easy it is, when you show your boss how easy it is to communicate and what some of those benefits are, then you can foster kind of a positive feedback loop for them and hopefully turn some of that communication around. That's the way that I prefer, and that's the way I've seen it work best. A lot of times when you deal with it directly and say, hey, we need more communication, we need to know what's going on, they either get defensive or they pull back in some way, shape, or form, or you don't get the kind of genuine conversation that you want from the general manager that's going to reap the benefits for everybody else. But great question, Carla. All right, so if you are coming to this late, no problem. You can drop down into the comments, ask me a question. I'll get it on the next episode of Mentor Minutes. Otherwise, be sure to check out the podcast. If you get a chance for that, you can take these things on your go and keep working that leadership mind and strengthening your leadership. That's the idea behind this. All right, everybody take care, and I will see you tomorrow where we will be talking about extreme ownership. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.